It's time for the Double Stop with Brian Sword.
Welcome to the Double Stop. I'm Brian Sword. This week I have guitarist Joey Tafolla on the show. Now this is one of my favorite types of interviews, a guitarist with a long history, but whose story is not really very well known. Well, Joey fills us in on all the ups and downs of his career, with lots of cool surprises. This week is the story of Joey Tafolla, a guitarist who's made his career walking the line between metal and shred.
Oh, that's a really good question. I was born in San Diego, Memorial Hospital on Memorial Day, and the musical family environment that I came from was actually pretty interesting. My mom is a vocalist, and my dad's a guitar player, and many people in my family are musicians. My mom had a gold record at the age of 16 years old. She sang the song called Angel Baby, which was a huge hit in the 60s. It was on Decca Records. It immediately went to the charts. My dad was the guitar player. They used to practice in my grandmother's garage, which is still in our family. That house is still in our family today. My grandmother's sister owns it. I just was there the other day with my family. A quick story on that is my mom, a 16-year-old girl, was dating my dad. They were both in high school. She wrote a poem, a love song called Angel Baby. I don't know if you remember the song, but they used it in the movie Hollywood Nights, Colors, Mi Familia. It's a pretty big deal. She wrote it as a poem in math class. They after school, went to my grandmother's house to rehearse, just like they normally do. Recorded it, took it to a place called Kresge's, which was the department store back then that everybody went to. They had listening stations, and there was a guy from Decca Records in there who heard it. And just like any one-hit wonder story on the movies, said, "I love it. Can I have the tapes?" They recorded it with a small, like a 4-track recorder, and pressed it, signed into a record deal, and within a month they had a #1 single and were opening for the Rolling at San Diego Sports Arena, just the high school students.
Oh my goodness, that's amazing.
Yeah. So in that, she's become, my mom's still alive today, become somewhat of a legend. I remember growing up with PA systems, pianos, drum sets, guitars in my living room. Most people had furniture, and we had instruments. And I used to goof around on all the stuff. Let's see, it was John Lennon had redone. If you can Google Angel Baby John Lennon, and you'll hear him singing. He says, "This is to you, Rosie, wherever you are, I love you." And he redid the song. On the back of the Houses of the Holy album from Led Zeppelin, look at the liner notes on the back, and it says, "Whatever happened to the Rosie in the originals?" And Robert Plant is a big fan of my mom from back then, and he mentions her in many of his songs. So as a 14-year-old, growing up a little bit further, 13, 12 years old, for punishment, my dad would make me go out on the road with my mom. Get out of the house. You're going on the road with your mom. And I hated it. But it was touring with my mom and the Diamonds, the Coasters, the Drifters, Louie, Chuck Berry. And I didn't realize the value in it back then. I just hated it. I wanted to go back home and hang out with my friends.
Of course.
But meeting Chuck Berry and taking friends, at 14, 15 years old, 16 years old, taking them to go meet Chuck Berry. And I still didn't see the value in it. Now I look back and I think, gosh, that was such an amazing time. That's and then my uncles, of course, everybody in my family plays something. So it was quite an interesting and thriving musical environment that I grew up in.
The family business.
And a little bit tumultuous, too, a little because my parents did wind up getting divorced when I was 2, and largely because of the one-hit wonder. But it was quite interesting, and still we have a lot of family members today involved in music, and it's a lot of fun, though.
And when did you start picking up music yourself?
I started playing, I have pictures of me holding a guitar when I was 5 years old. I know that shortly after that, I had tried the trombone in third grade, barely able to pick it up. It was bigger than I was, in Catholic school glee club. And then I settled in on drums around that time, shortly after. And then by the time I was about 11 years old is when I started playing guitar. I was messing around with my dad's guitar for so long he could never get a hold of it. And finally just got me my own acoustic guitar. It's
interesting that you were playing at that point, but the thought of going on tour, you had no interest.
I didn't. I remember at that time specifically that one time having to go on the road with my mom. I brought a Beatles songbook and I was trying to learn the solo, the Paul McCartney solo, "Maybe I'm Amazed," and which was still one of my favorite all-time melodies. And I was playing, but it was just I didn't want to be traveling because it was the same songs, the same skit, the same words, the same show every single night, but a different small club. And it bored the heck out of me as a 14-year-old kid.
And then what about your own early bands? When did that start up?
Let's see. I think one of my earliest experiences, I had a lot of friends around who, many of them turned out to go and play and do big things too, much like I always look back at it, the scene of any scene back in the day when you had the Yardbirds and everybody all in one area trying to make it, and so a lot of my friends have come up to do some great things, and but I remember that my very first time we used to practice in my garage, I had a drummer named Joey Garillo and another friend of mine named Rick Trone on guitar, and another friend of mine named Joey Padilla, who was also a drummer, still friends with him today. But my first real band was a band called I don't even know if Executioner, and we were basically a Sabbath cover band, and our originals sounded like Sabbath.
And that's high school, or
that was high school, junior high school.
And at that point, so you're influenced by Tony Iommi at that point, in terms of your, we know you got it into shred, but what were your influences at that point?
Oh, at that point, my influences were much like any other kid at that age. I was more drawn always to the Euro metal sound. So Sabbath, Tony Iommi, Richie Blackmore. Even at that point, I was Deep Purple. Those were two big ones. But I couldn't ignore Ted Nugent and some of the other famous guys. I'd learned Stranglehold much like most any other kid tried to learn it from an 8-track.
That's harder than learning it from a record.
Oh, yeah, from an 8-track you have to actually wait for it to go. You've got to just basically jam along with it and learn whatever you can do as you're improvising and jamming to it, and wait for it to spin around one more time to get back to where you need to learn it. Awesome. Or that you were having trouble with.
That sounds painful.
On a side note, I was having this discussion with somebody the other day about how today you can go on YouTube and get a tutorial of just about anything you want to play. And I was telling him, when I was a kid, you physically had to go to a concert, get as close to the stage as you possibly could, and look to see what the guy was doing, and whatever you could remember by the time you got home to pick up a guitar was what you got.
That's why people like Eddie Van Halen always played with their back to the crowd when they were doing something new.
Yeah. So I'd look those days. It's like, oh, he was playing it somewhere around the 7th fret, and I think he had his fingers on the A and the G string, or that's what we had to do. It then became an age where we could sneak tape recorders, those big, massive tape recorders, into gigs and tape record people and try and not get caught.
At what point did you decide to take music seriously, and when did you know that was going to be your pursuit?
I think it was I think it was, I was pretty serious right out of the gate. I had already seen my parents. I was, in awe of my dad and being a guitarist, so right out of the gate, I'm thinking 12. There was a certain level of seriousness that I already had. When I was 14 years old, I recall another level of seriousness. And for sure, by the time I was 16, I was thought I was going to be a lifer.
And what was, like, when you finished your high school age, what pursuit did you do to follow that?
That's interesting. When I wasn't going to school much because I was playing a lot, and I was always in the garage playing. But at that time, was in LA. I graduated in 1980. So in the early 80s, right at that time, the scene was exploding here. And you could go, I took it for granted. I thought, you're going to go see Motley Crue, Poison, Rat, Warrant, Dante Fox, Snow, all the guys who were forming, who would eventually, switch members back and forth to form all the bands that we knew as, MTV stars and rock and roll idols back then. The steps that I took, here's one thing. I remember reading a Guitar Player magazine, and I took this, it said, give yourself a test on what you're doing to be successful. And I might have been 17, 18. And it said, give yourself a 1 to a 5, depending on what you do. So put yourself in proximity. Give yourself 5 points if you live in a major city. Give yourself 1 point if you live in, a farm in, Kansas. And give yourself 5 points for if you subscribe to more than 5 magazines in your industry. Give yourself 1 point if you subscribe to none. It had a checklist of putting yourself within proximity of where you want to be, how much practice do you have, how much do you record yourself, do you make a conscious effort to give people recordings of your music. And so I at that age, I was already thinking like that and trying to do everything that I possibly could to ensure some level of success. And at that time, there was also a very famous music paper, which was called The Recycler. And that you could go in and just look for, almost the whole magazine was singer looking for band, drummer looking for vocalist, guitar player looking for same influences, Ronnie James Dio, and that's what we did. We waited for The Recycler to come out on Thursday and start looking for singers and bass players and auditioning people, and then, of course, trying to find bands and play local in LA, and that's when I eventually wound up finding Jag Panzer, which was what I would call my first real band.
And what level were they at that point?
Jag Panzer had just finished recording their first 4-song EP with only one guitar player, Mark Bridie, doing all the guitar work, and they had moved to LA from Colorado looking to make it and decided to add a second guitar player. A really interesting story about that is they moved to a place called San Dimas, did not have a house phone at all, but placed an ad in The Recycler and said they're looking for a guitar player. It was a Thursday night, a Thursday day around 3 o'clock. I got a call from some guy, I can't remember his name now, but we did thank him on the CD, the Ample Destruction CD. He called me up and says, hey, you don't know me, but I read your ad, and I just put a bunch of influences that guitar player, excellent looks, good stage presence, chops, influences, Blackmore, Randy Rhoads. I just loaded it up, right? I wanted to be in a band. And he said, you seem to have all the right influences. Here's my problem. He said, I have an audition with this band tonight. They don't have a phone, and I can't make it, so I'm trying to find somebody to take my place. And you look like you would fit the band perfectly. Would you do it? And he said it was in some place called San Dimas I had never heard of before. So I had to get what was called a Thomas guide and find it. It was an hour away. I'd never ventured that hour and a half away, that far out of my city. And I showed up and explained to the guys, I'm not the guy you're expecting, but that guy called me, and I'm taking his place. And we jammed, and it hit it off perfectly, and from that point, we were a band that first night.
And what was it about that band musically that made it such a good fit?
It felt right. They had similar interests. They had Iron Maiden, Judas Priest. They were actually a little bit more very Euro metal. And it's exactly what I was looking for, was more of that Judas Priest, Deep Purple, Ritchie Blackmore. I don't think Accept was out, but Iron Maiden. But to go back just a step, at that level of their career, they had just released their first 4-song EP on Azra Records, and the record was getting critical acclaim. People were praising it. It was getting put right in the same league as all the other newcomers right at that time, Metallica and Anvil, and it was probably 1981, and they had a lot. They had a lot of reviews, and yeah, when we just jammed, it fit perfectly. I didn't know any of the songs. I just felt they showed them to me right there on the spot, and I played them, and it just felt good.
Now they've got the final lineup. They've got a 4-song EP that's getting some heat. What did you guys do?
We rehearsed a lot, and that's all we did here, which was a shame, because the scene in LA was kicking ass. Can I say kicking ass?
Oh, yeah.
The scene was exploding in LA. Everybody was getting signed. You could just, if you had a band, you could get signed. And we didn't play one LA gig while they were here. We rehearsed, and then the guys had some financial difficulty here and had to move back to Colorado, and that was the end of that. It was really crazy. They had very little financial support from the label, no financial support from the label, no money, and the landlord wound up confiscating all their gear because he owed money. They owed him money, which I guess nowadays you couldn't really do that, but back then they could. And so they went home with their tail between their legs, without their gear, came back about a few months later after I had not even heard from them. I got a call on the day after Halloween, November 1st, and they woke me up and said, "Joey, we're going to come and get you. We're going to record another record." They had a budget. And I said, "Well, that's great. When are you coming?" And they said, "We're here." I said, "Who does that? We're here." They drove out here to pick me up without asking me. It's just the weirdest thing I'd ever heard. So they brought enough money to buy all their equipment back from the landlord and decided they'd wait till they got here to call me. And what did I said, yeah, I packed up a suitcase of clothes, which I thought was, they said 3 to 4 weeks to do the record, and my guitar and my amp, and left with them the next day. I was in Colorado for 3 years.
Awesome.
Who does that?
Who goes?
Yeah, that was crazy. That was really crazy on my part, too, because L.A. was the place you wanted to be still, 1982, 83, 84, even 85. And we left. It didn't make any sense at all. But we left, and then we went to go record Ample Destruction, which was the follow-up to the 4-song EP, and that one actually was a lot of critical acclaim as well.
But it's still on a small label, though, right?
That's right. Azra Records, again, released it. No support, no tour support. We would have been so much better off with Metal Blade, with Brian Slagle, or with Shrapnel. He was doing a lot of the U.S. metal stuff. We would have been so much better off on just about any other label. any label. MafiaRecords.com would have been better.
Oh, different time, though. Different time back then.
Yeah.
And did you tour at all for it?
We didn't tour at all. We stayed in Colorado. It was the strangest thing for us. The record was doing great. Other bands were talking about us. We were getting reviewed in high regard with all the bands who are really starting to make it. We had a few major labels come out to see us. We did some demos for A&M and some other people, and Arista, and but nothing ever came of it. And we just didn't. We did. If you had a manual of how not to get signed, that's the Bible we were following.
Then how long did you stick it out then?
I stuck it out there quite a bit. What I did was I recorded. I think I was there till about 95, and then.
Oh wow.
Yeah. Oh no, not 95. Sorry, 85.
85. Okay.
Shoot me now. Well, so what happened was a band that I had right before then called a very original name called Rocks, but we had 2 X's.
Oh wow.
So I actually they were doing a record, and they heard the Ample Destruction right after we recorded it, and they said, "Hey, would you like to be back in the band?" They had salary pay, and so I left to come back to do that for just a little bit. Didn't like it, and then came back. They accepted me. But if you want to go back a little bit, before Jagdpanzer, I helped start a record label called Rockshire Records. If you remember, they were the first ones to release. They released Alcatraz, the first Alcatraz with Graham Bonnet.
Oh right, yeah.
Ingrid's first solo album. I was a 19-year-old kid who found an investor. Who I said, "We're going to start a label," and he said yes. And he wound up putting millions and millions of dollars into the label. Him and his wife, Shirley. I named the record company Rockshire Records after Rocky and Shirley because they did so much for us. A completely different story that would take a long time to run the gamut. But I watched Yngwie at that time rehearse for his solo record with Barrymore Barlow, knowing that what the world was going to be in store for. And boy, what an amazing time that was, to actually be like a 19-year-old kid, get a guy to put millions into you, to put you on a salary. We were barefoot. We were kids with bare feet and skateboards, and we had rehearsing in a garage. And eventually the record label went under because the owners got arrested for embezzling from Hughes Aircraft. That's where all the money was coming from. And the label disappeared. But we had the record plant come in and put a replica studio of the record plant at our facility.
At 1920.
Yeah, it was huge. Literally, I found one building in the industrial complex. I said, "This is it, Rocky. I found the place." And he came and looked at it, and he told me, "One day I'm going to own every building in this complex," and he did. And but later on, they both got arrested and put in prison for embezzling the money from Hughes Aircraft, and we were all a part of that. Me and a few friends, and we were the envy of every guitar player, musician locally here, with guys from the record plant, and just spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on equipment for us, and light shows, and we didn't know what to do with it. But so you asked me how long I stayed in Colorado. I came back to play with that band when they asked me to for about 3 or 4 months, and the music was too light for me. So I came back to Colorado, stayed there for a little while, and then one day, Mike Varney and I used to talk on the phone with, if you know Mike, at that time, you could reach him between midnight and 4 in the morning. And he would play you songs of people he had discovered for his Spotlight a New Talent, right? And he would say, I would walk to the phone booth, probably a half a mile in the snow at like 1 a.m, and put quarters in there to call him to hear, like, the new guy, and stand there freezing, and once in a while I'll hear that you have 2 minutes left. Please deposit 55 cents, and I would just keep throwing change in so that I could hear music. It was nuts. And one time, he would start sending me stuff on cassette. Hey, check this guy's out. And he sent me the first Racer X and the first MacAlpine. I think even the first Mind's Eye of Vinnie Moore. And he sent those to me and said, here's what I'm going to be releasing. And I got them a year in advance. And I said, okay, this is it. I need to change what I'm doing. And my whole goal was only to be in Spotlight for new talent. That's all. Do you remember that column?
Yep.
So that's my whole goal, was just to be in there. And I wanted to take lessons from Paul. I said, hey, could you hook me up with those guys? He said, yeah. So I told the band I can't do this anymore, and said, one day I'm leaving tomorrow, packed up all my stuff, and went to San Francisco, sold everything I had, which wasn't much, stayed in San Francisco, and took lessons from MacAlpine. Pretty much slept on his couch the whole time he was. He would go to practice with Driver and record then on maximum security, I think, and I would jam with his girlfriend all day long in his apartment, waiting for him to come home, and then we would jam. And it got to the point where he was like, hey, dude, you just want to pay rent and sleep on the couch? I mean, really, I need to charge you for rent. And then stayed with him and learned a ton of stuff, and then moved to Hollywood and studied with Paul Gilbert and became kind of a part of the MI experience. I was just going for it. I knew what I wanted to be like. And that's when I left, and just couldn't stay in Colorado any longer. It was 1986 when I left, finally. So I gave it a good 3 years.
Now, did Mike just sign you to his record label, or did he put you in the column too?
Oh, that's a sore spot. That's a sore spot. So I didn't want to. I didn't want to be the label. My only thought was to be in the Spotlight for New Talent. That was my dream, and as for all of us, right? It was the dream. It meant recognition, and so I was doing demos, and finally I did this one demo for him that I thought, man, this is going to get him. And he called me up about midnight. At that time, now I'm living in California, and had a phone. And he called me and said, hey, I'm listening to your demo now, and I think we got something here. And I said, really? He goes, yeah, I'm thinking that we get Tony to play keys and produce, and get Paul Gilbert to do some guest soloing, and that later on we got Wally Voss from Yngwie to play bass, and I'm thinking we do a record. And I couldn't have been happier, and we talked for a minute and hung up the phone, and about 2 minutes later I called him back, and I said, hey, can I be in Spotlight? And his answer was, well, now many people might disagree with me or may not know this, but the people who know Mike Varney will know this, that I hold him in high regard, and he's an extremely ethical person. He said, Joey, it would be a conflict of interest, since I'm not allowed to spotlight artists of mine in the magazine because it's a conflict of interest, and I just signed you 5 minutes ago. I can't spotlight you now. And I was like, no. It was, I tried to I said, look, I don't want the deal. We're not officially inked yet. And he said, no, we made it, we talked, and I spent another 15 minutes trying to talk to him, like, how do we get this done? And so I never got in Spotlight.
And how was the recording of the record? Did you have enough material prepared from all the demoing, or did you write all new stuff?
We had a lot of really interesting material
Butch Carlson, the drummer from Jag Panzer, when I moved out here, that's the part I didn't mention, I called Butch and said, dude, I'm out here in California. I love Butch. He was a great drummer. We got along well. I said, you got to come out here. Let's do this. And he did. He left Jag Panzer as well, and he came out here, and we started working on feverishly working on the solo CD and material. And we had a lot of material that was, I felt, really unique, and it was not like anything Shrapnel had. And towards the very last few weeks of going into the studio, I just started writing a lot of new material that wound up sounding a little bit more like cookie-cutter Varney stuff, MacAlpine, Vinnie Moore, Paul Gilbert. And Wally was jumped in at the last minute because our bass player from Sweden, who I'd love to find if anybody knows Dave Camacha, bass player, an amazing talent. He couldn't do the record because he was a Swedish national, and we couldn't get him to do the record, which I thought was a bunch of baloney, actually, and I felt really bad that he couldn't do it, and he was heartbroken. And I think that there's now, being an older guy, there's certainly a way he could have done the record, and I feel that it was kind of partially in the interest of the record company to have somebody of notoriety, which they always did. That's what played into it. But I thought it was really because we couldn't have a guy from Sweden playing on the record, and I didn't even bother to contest it and say, look, you had Yngwie play on a record just 2 years ago, last year. And so there's a guy named Dave Camacha who is an amazing talent who helped write a lot of that stuff, who's a bass player from Sweden who certainly deserved to have that. And if I've tried to make contact with him, I can't find him anywhere. If anybody knows where he is, I want to do another record with him. Not only to make up for it, but he's just extremely talented. So your question, did we have enough material? I felt we did have enough material. But we kept writing and writing, and as we started getting closer and closer, and then with Tony producing, the record started taking a different form. But if you hear the original demos, it was nothing like the CD. And I've seen some interviews with people, maybe statements from people saying that Tony wrote a lot of the stuff, and Tony helped with melodies, but Tony didn't write the stuff. He helped with a lot of the melodies, though, but a lot of the stuff, some of the old demos floating around, people say, oh, this is Tony wrote this song, but he to clarify, he produced and came up with melodies, and I followed the direction of the producer because he knew what Mike wanted and what Mike could sell. But I thought we had great stuff on our own.
And then how was he as a producer then? It sounds like he was trying to make a record for the label as opposed to for you then.
I felt that he was doing the best job that he could according to who he was. And, you listen to MacAlpine's music, and that's who he was. And I think a lot of those influences came through on the CD, which I'm very happy about. I'm in love with his playing, and with that at that time I was in love with his music and what the label stood for. So we knew what had to happen because the label had a certain audience, and I wasn't too far off. I would say more of our stuff was more raw, less stacked harmonies, more early Yngwie, Al Di Meola. It was a strange time for me because I was used to playing a Strat through a Marshall, and Tony made me play all his BC Rich guitars, which, if you know anything about the way a Stratocaster feels, and a nice 70s Strat, I had a cream-colored Strat with a white pickguard with a sticker that said "Play Loud" on it, and it was scalloped. So that'll tell you what I was thinking, right? Where my mindset was. The scalloped fingerboard. And so that's what our sound was like. And I played all his BC Rich guitars which were so awkward for me to play, those real flat necks, wide and fat and Floyd Rose, and it was everything opposite of what I know and was used to. But I think as a producer, I think Tony did a good job for what he had to do with the label, what he had to do for the label, and what he wanted to do for himself. But it was a trying time working with him, and I wasn't necessarily happy at all with it at times. It was really tough. And it put me through the ringer to the point where my confidence level was so down, even by 3/4 of the way through the record. Mike, this is a true story. Mike Varney called me up. We had not even finished mixing, and he said, "Hey, Ozzy wants you to come down." And I said no. My confidence level from just doing that record and being so, just beaten down from it. It wasn't a great experience at all. In the actual recording of the record, it was very laborious, very trying, very. But the overall experience of working with Shrapnel, my first record, working with Tony, Paul, Wally, Prairie Sun Recording Studios, that was amazing. I mean, everybody was shooting for that. But the actual recording was really bad, and my confidence level from being in there in that environment wasn't one of let's build him up so he plays well. It was let's break him down so he does what we want him to do. And so I said no to Ozzy. Not that I had the gig, but I didn't even want to go. All I wanted to do was finish the record and go home.
So what did you do then when you finished the record?
I went back with a record in my hand, and then the process starts. It was cookie cutter Shrapnel stuff. You do a record, you get 100 hours if you're on budget. I went way over budget, but if you're Racer X, you get 100 hours to do the record. I think Paul told me they went over budget by 4 hours. Try to do a record in 100 hours. That's with all that stuff. I mean, that's one pass through of everything. So I went home, and immediately what happens is Ivan, his guitarist, calls you and says, "We want to endorse you." They fly you out to Pennsylvania. They do a photo shoot. They put a guitar in your hand. They do a photo shoot, and next thing you know, you're on your full-page ads in all the major magazines, right? And all the people are calling, and all the magazines are doing interviews, and you're getting fan letters, and then a little while later you start getting these royalty checks, and people are noticing you, and it's that was almost the cookie-cutter Shrapnel thing, what happened with Paul, Tony, Vinny, myself, and go to the NAMM show for the first time, and there's huge 10-foot pictures of you at the Ibanez booth, and it was great. But what I did when I got home was I just wanted to play guitar again. I wanted to be me and play guitar the way that I wanted to play guitar.
Now, when it came time to doing the second record, did the experience of doing the first one influence how you went in to do the second?
Let me think about that. I'm trying to think. 91. In between, I want to tell you, in between, here's an interesting story. In between the first and second record, Buckethead, who we know, right? Most
of course
know Buckethead. I respectfully won't say his name, but he came over to my house he started taking lessons from me. Within a few hours of jamming, I'm like, dude, we should just jam and put a record together. And so his mom used to drive him over to my house, like on a Saturday afternoon, or a number of times, because he was only 16 and didn't have a driver's license, I think, or 18. I still didn't have a driver's license, whatever age he was. And we would just jam all day and come up with stuff. And we made some recordings, and I told Mike, I said, man, I want to do this thing. It's like a different style Racer X kind of thing, and I've got this, amazing guy that I want to do with, and Mike just put the kibosh on it and said, "No, I don't think that'll do anything. I don't like it. No, we'll just." But later on, I'm so thankful that he didn't, because when Buck had told me, he's like, "Hey, you know what? I'm going to do on my own thing." And anyway, I said, "Dude, he's not going to do anything with us." And he said, "Well, I got this other idea where I'm going to put a Kentucky Fried Chicken bucket on my head, and I'm going to wear this hockey mask, and I'm going to, I got this story about a guy who was born and raised in a chicken coop by chickens, and I looked at him. I'll never forget. We were at the West LA Music Show or something. I was like, "Dude, that is the most ridiculously stupid thing I've ever." I looked at him like he had like he had a third eye in his forehead.
Well, when you explain it like that, it does sound pretty ridiculous.
Oh, he goes, "Yeah, and I'm going to have this, and then I'm going to have these extra characters, and one guy, he does this, and the chickens talk to him, and he only speaks chicken language." And I was like, "No, that is the worst idea I've ever heard in my life." And wouldn't you know it, a year later, Buckethead is born, and he's a smash.
Well, it's unique.
Yeah. So that kind of happened, like in the middle. So going in, you said going into Info Blue, how did I approach that? I didn't have any reservations, or any of the reservations that I had from any. I didn't have any reservations from based on any experience that I previously had. It wasn't. It was all forgotten, gone, and the relationship that I have with Tony, and still have, but back then, he taught me so much. It was amazing. It was like a fast forward on my playing. If anybody at that time would have appreciated the opportunity to hang out with him every day, have him show you everything that he's doing, break it down for you, let you tape record it, show you where you're going wrong with it, and help you develop your style. So it was an essential part of my growth. And he was a great teacher and a good friend and a great guy to hang around. It was just that when we got in the studio, it wasn't a pleasant experience. But backing up, I'll say we did what we had to do. We got a record done that was good for the Shrapnel crowd, and it suited the label. It did well. I got a lot of recognition for it. And so Infra Blue was just a departure from that. I wanted to try something different. I was learning. I was getting into more blues. I was listening to Steve Morris. I was getting into country because country, it's harder to flat pick. If you listen to some of those flat picking guys, doggy, right? The country flat pickers, they were speed picking before Yngwie. I had no reservations about how it was going to happen, no fear. But the approach was a little different. And when I told Mike what I wanted to do, we had some demos. And then again, what happened is 3 weeks, in the last 2 weeks before the recording, I almost rewrote a whole album. It's like all of a sudden some new things came over me. And I met with John Onder up at the recording studio. And we just started collaborating and writing, and I think we wrote probably at least half to 3/4 of the record up at Prairie Sun, just hanging out. Like everything else much like Out of the Sun. The demos got you the deal, but once you got there, you were so inspired, and you were striving to go to new lengths. Things started changing, some for the better, some for the worse, but you're trying new things.
And that record came out 91, so that's probably just past the peak of the Shrapnel Shredder. Probably grunge hasn't really taken over yet, but how was the response for the second record in terms of the musical climate?
I felt that it was great again. I had a lot of fans who were waiting for me to do something. Many of them probably thought I was going to do neoclassical, and everybody was producing records every year.
I didn't feel, and I never wanted to just keep saying the same thing over again. I felt like I didn't have anything new to say. It would have been the same scales, the same melodies, slightly different solos, and sure, it would have been another record, and fans may have liked it, but it wouldn't have been interesting for me. So by the time 91 came around, my playing had developed in different ways, and I felt, gosh, I had something new to say, and I was excited to say it. Having Dean on the record opened up a lot of doors because he was a popular drummer, and drummers then started listening to my CD for his work. I based on the feedback that I've received from emails and Facebook and from social media, and just I think the record was well received to the guitar community, and it had a little bit more of a flavor of what was coming up. I think of Ice Satch. Not that I put myself in that category, but it wasn't. The Infra Blue wasn't classically charged.
Now, in 91, that's also around the time that a lot of the Shrapnel artists started getting plucked by other bands, like Richie Kotzen and Marty Freeman and whatnot. Was that something that you explored too, looking to grow to another band, or did you want to be doing your own thing?
Yeah, it's everybody's dream, is to eventually get called for that one gig and become, and make the scene, right? I was no different. I was just unfortunate that I never got a gig. Every one of my Shrapnel colleagues around me were getting gigs, and I was the last one. I was the last of the Mohicans, and I couldn't understand it. I had auditioned for Alice Cooper right after Vinnie Moore left. Him and Peter Morticelli recommended me for the gig, and they said learn these 4 songs, and I did. Here's a lesson to be learned. They said learn these 4 songs, so I did. And Alice said, "Do you know any more songs?" I said, a couple, like Billion Dollar Babies. I played when I was a kid, and all the School's Out. But no, they told me to learn these 4. It was a Friday. It was a Thursday. They had no rehearsal on Friday, and they traveled on Saturday for a live radio show on top of a building in New York on Sunday. And had I known all the songs, I probably could have jumped in. They got Pete Friesen back. So since that point, whenever I have an audition, I learned everything the band has ever done. Megadeth, I auditioned right before Marty. They got Marty, and it was just one of those things. Every time I went to an audition, I never got one. But I'm always of the feeling that the person who's supposed to get the gig is the one who gets the gig. Marty was the right guy for that gig. At that time, I can't think of a better player for that gig, and it wasn't me. I didn't fit the band. I would have done it, but I didn't fit the band like he did. So I was just constantly going for auditions, but never getting the gig.
Not to be a downer, but just how frustrating was that then?
It was never frustrating for me, and because I've always been of the mindset that the right person gets the job at the right time, and I always looked at it afterwards and said, "Oh, Cooper got Pete Friesen back to do the Feed My Frankenstein tour. He was the right guy to do it. He knew all the songs and he fit the band extremely well. Marty, band, so and it's knowing who you are in life, right? I'm always very happy with who I am and knowing who I am. So it wasn't frustrating at all for me. My mindset at that time and all the years before that was I would rather be extremely poor and live in a shack and play guitar, be the best guitar player in the entire world with nobody knowing who I was, as opposed to being famous and rich and not be able to play the guitar as well as, some of the other guys. So I was always just about the music.
that was my mindset at that time. So I'm really, really okay with it. And I really see that with all seriousness. It wasn't frustrating at all. It was about the ride and the experience of, hey, guess who I met today? And guess what I did today?
We're into the 90s now, and as with many of my interviews, it comes down to grunge hits, guitar shreds are not cool anymore. So what did you decide to do at that point?
Oh, you know what's interesting is so many guitar players cut their hair and stopped playing chops, lowered their guitars down to their knees, and started playing a different style so that they could try and capture some success or continue on and be relevant in the industry. Right? We saw that.
Of course.
And chops just didn't exist anymore. I think that chops for me, I went from the early 90s all the way to maybe 95, 96. I just went out on mass clinic tour. I did over 1,000 guitar clinics. I was on the road 250 days a year doing guitar clinics and just playing and just chopping out still every day. Playing, fortunate enough to play with and do shows and play on the same stage with Al Di Meola and Carlos Santana, and meeting up with fellow clinicians Jennifer Batten and Michelangelo, and just they were doing thousands of clinics too, and we would cross paths all the time, mostly Europe. But some in Japan and Brazil, and some in the States. I had just kept doing what I was doing, just going out to music stores, making money, doing clinics. It was a good living. And in the interim there, I actually toured with Michael Sweet and some other people, and that was a lot of fun. The singer from Stryper.
Yeah.
Michael's a great guy. I did a nice tour of the States with him, and
a solo tour then?
Pardon me?
Was it like a Michael Sweet solo tour and you're part of the band?
Yeah, it was. It was Michael's first solo album.
Right.
That he did all the guitars on, and he asked me, here's a story about that, which was one of the funniest things. Michael, I just got off the road from doing clinics, out for 10 weeks, beat to hell. I'm living in Yorba Linda, and I'm about ready to go to sleep, and my sister said, I said, man, I'm tired of doing this. And she goes, you know what, I wish you could play in a band. I said, yeah, me too. And she said, well, you should play with Stryper. And I said, well, yeah, they broke up about 10 million years ago, so that's not going to happen. She goes, well, I'm gonna say a prayer tonight for you that you would play for Stryper anyway. And I kind of laughed. The next morning, I woke up and the phone rang, and it was Michael Sweet who called me. This is the truth. Called me up and said, hey, this is Michael Sweet. I thought it was a joke. And he said, I'm looking for a guitar player. I live in Yorba Linda. I'm near you. Do you mind if I come by? He came. I said, yeah. So he said, yeah, I'll be over in about an hour. I just woke up and I looked around my bedroom floor and I said, holy crap. I started kicking beer bottles and putting magazines under the bed and tried to clean up the best I could. He came over with the drummer. We talked for like an hour and a half, and then we bonded over killing a wasp in my bedroom. And then he said, well, do you want the job? I said, hell yeah, that'd be great. And as he's walking out the door, he goes, hey, just one other thing. Do you mind if I hear you play for a second? I was like, oh, shoot, you never even asked to hear me play. I said, yeah, I picked up a guitar and just played for 2 or 3 minutes, a minute or two. And he said, okay, yeah, we start rehearsing tomorrow. And left 3 days later, I think. But yeah, during the time of the mid '90s, I went on just massive teaching clinic tours and music schools, mostly living in 250 days a year in Europe.
Wow.
Yeah.
And what led you then back to Jagdpanzer?
I was recording my plastic CD at the time, just to throw in a plug for Bogner, Reinhold Bogner, a great friend of mine that I met through Key Marcello, who had played on the Info Blue CD and did a bang-up job. I had met with Reinhold. He loaned me the Bogner that was hardwired for Steve Vai's Fire Garden album for my plastic CD, and that's the one I used for the CD. And I was doing that already. Another interesting and true story is that I was talking with Mark, and I've always loved that band. I played best in that band, and I don't believe I believe the band plays, and I told this to Mark Bryany, the other guitar player, and I've said this to the guys before too. In my heart, I play best. I play well in many different instances, but I play best with that band, and I believe that no other guitar player plays that shines well in that band as well as I do. That the band actually sounds better or plays better with me. It's just I love the guys, and they're a big part of my childhood. We have a good time every time we get together, and I had all the time talked to Mark and said, man, we should do something. And he called me, we were talking, and he said, I can't, he was really upset. He said, I can't get the band a record deal. I can't get us a deal. I called up a friend of mine, Bob Nalbandian, who runs Hard Radio, and called up Bob, known him for years and years, just even to this day. We just talked last week. He was at my show. I played the Randy Rhoads Remembered in L.A. with Brian Tishy and a bunch of Mike Orlando from Adrenaline Mob. Played that last Thursday, and then Saturday at the Coach House here in San Clemente with those guys, and Bob showed up for the gig. I called Bob and I said, hey, Panzer needs a deal. And he called Century Media, and the next day Panzer had a deal. And yeah, it was that easy. It was I was already recording in the middle of recording my CD and doing some clinic tours, and the guys had and the way we do records now is mostly Mark writes records, records all the guitar parts, and he sends me the stuff, and I just throw solos on them and some color rhythm tracks maybe. And so that's what happened. I said, let's do it. We recorded the record, mixed it at Morris Sound Studios, and I think I recorded the solo to Black. It was kind of hurrying up, and we had to get to mix down, and I still hadn't finished all the solos. So I just brought my guitar, and we met up there, and I finished a couple of solos there at the studio. We mixed it, and that was that. It was just, let's do this. We had talked about it, and I got us the deal. And then shortly after that, Century Media did not want to pay at all for any tour expenses whatsoever. So the band had a tour, but it didn't pay. And not even, I tried to make a deal and say, look, I can't leave, but can you afford? I think it was, I don't remember now, but I think we were trying to ask for $500 a week or something, and they were like, absolutely not. We can never pay you $500 a week for 2 weeks. That's $1,000. Are you kidding me? And that could ruin the entire industry.
That's when you know you're all alone.
Yeah, and so it was heartbreaking. I told the guys, hey, I can't go on the road. It was a big deal. I just couldn't. I couldn't see myself. And at that time, I was making money too. So I even said, I think it came down to this. I think I even said, look, just give me $250 a week, and I'll do clinics on my off days in Europe. I'll pull I'll pull some extra money doing a clinic here, like during the day at a music store on an off day or something, to cover all my other expenses. And the label would, and my numbers probably might be off, but I don't think they would come up with, the budget was zero. So I didn't do it, and that's unfortunate. And after that, I don't remember which guitar player they got, but they got somebody to play, and that guy became part of the band, and I was in and out all in a few months.
Oh, wow. And that's when you continued on with the plastic CD then?
Yeah, I'd finished the Fourth Judgment, which, by the way, I think some of my best solos that I've ever recorded are on that CD. I love it. It's the way I love playing with the band. And there's a couple of solos on there where I really caught some magic, and I was like, wow, I'm going to keep that. And I finished up the plastic CD, but at that time I had already started a business. I think I had already started a business which was thriving, which is I make musical instrument accessories for pretty much the NAMM show. Every major brand from Fender to Dunlop, D'Addario, Line 6, Marshall, you name it, we are making products for one of those guys, importing from China, and also there's screen printed and embroidered apparel, and doing a lot of band merch for guys like Y&T. I think we just shipped some Y&T product today or tomorrow because they're on the road. And but I already started a successful business, and I had just got a gold record playing for Tyrese. You know him as the Fast and the Furious Transformer actor, right?
Yeah, I didn't know you played with him.
Yeah, I got a gold record for playing with him on the 2,000-watt CD. And so I was like, okay, I've got other things I'm doing, and yeah, I finished up the plastic CD, and that didn't really do much. It didn't get released in the States. I think Ed Benzil from Mascot Records, who I'd known since Roadrunner days, released it in Europe. I don't think it saw an official Japanese or United States release, and it was simply because I didn't put the effort, and nobody put the effort into doing it.
That's 2001. That was a challenging time because iTunes wasn't really a thing. The digital distribution wasn't there, so if it was only released on Mascot overseas, if somebody here wanted to buy it, they're gonna have to shell out $50 to get a CD. It just wasn't really feasible at that point.
Yeah, that's right. You got the numbers exactly right. That's probably what it would have been as a $50 import.
Yeah, it was a tough time. Trust me, I bought a few at that time. It was tough, It's a little different now. Like you look at a guy like Richie Kotzen, he's still maybe in Winery Dogs, but he still puts out his CDs, independently on his own because everything's there now to do it.
Yeah, and by the way, Winery Dogs, smoking band.
Oh, yeah, I know, right?
What an amazing band. Richie is so good, and I love that band. I never really got a chance to speak with Richie much in our younger days, but we connected this last NAMM show in January, and we were at a dinner table together, and what a great guy.
So let's come back to you and talk about now. You're playing the Randy Rhoads shows, or at least you did a few of them, which is a fun gig, and lots of great guys are involved in that. What else do you have going on these days?
Well, there's something else that maybe fans might find interesting is I stopped playing guitar for 15 years. I did not pick up a guitar once. I stopped cold turkey.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going to stop playing. I don't feel like it anymore. I was playing 10 to 12 hours a day since I was 14 years old, or 15, 16, somewhere in there, and touring and everything. And I just thought, I don't know what to say anymore with it. And I got tired and started the business. And it was about 2 years ago, maybe a year and a half ago. It was right before the last time I went out about this time, last summer to go out with Jagdpanzer. I started playing shortly before that to prepare for that. And I want to tell you, anybody who's listening who might give this some thought, is that I always placed an enormous amount of importance on the physical aspect of playing guitar, which is that practicing. And after not playing guitar at all for 15 years, I realized how quickly it started coming back, that my mind had been playing music the entire 15 years, hearing stuff on the radio, thinking, oh, no, I would have done it that way, or hearing different things. And it became clear to me that, and when I speak with other professionals like Sean Lane, when Sean and I spent an enormous amount of time together every day for months and months, and when I speak with people like Sean, who had also stopped playing, I think, for 10 years, and other people who put the guitar down for, 5, 6, 7, 8 years, and come back and just been strong, that playing guitar, I always thought was 90% physical, or largely physical, and a small amount of mental, but it's actually the other way around. It's mostly mental and very little physical, because think about being out of shape. You can go back into the gym, and within 90 days get some reasonable tone. Within 6 months, you could be ripped. Same with my feeling is playing. It's all about your mind telling your fingers what to do. And if you have creativity in your mind and all the new things that you want to hear and play, it's just a matter of time before your your fingers catch up. So that's my story on that. I didn't play guitar since 90. No, when did I stop? It was right after Plastic. I stopped and then started about maybe a year and a half ago.
What is it that gets you to pick it up again?
I felt like it. I really was inspired to play again. And part of it was getting the chance to play with my childhood friends again, Jagdpanzer, Mark and John and Harry and Rickard. And that was a big deal for me. And I at that time, I was starting to play for about 6 months actually before that. And I was getting a lot of offers to play with people, and I just said no. I'm playing for fun, and I played with the guys in Jagdpanzer because it's a chance for me to reconnect with my childhood and some of the best memories I've ever had. We had a lot of good times. We had fun, and even the hard times were even the living in the warehouses and going down to the local burger shop to steal the ketchup to come back and try and make tomato soup, which tastes horrible, by the way. Even those times, looking back, were fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, being motivated to play and fun, and now I play quite a bit, and I actually have a Randy Rhoads just started a Randy Rhoads tribute as a result of this too, and we're doing our 5th show in Phoenix, Arizona, coming up this Saturday. So it's brand new, but it's a lot of fun. And the drummer for Jagdpanzer and I Jagdpanzer is pretty much a festival touring band. You can count on the extent of your relationship with Jagdpanzer is 2 weeks of festivals in Europe in the summer, an album, and maybe a couple fly-in dates in the States, and that's your year. So we thought, shoot, we want to keep things going. What can we do? We decided to start some kind of just fun band to keep our chops up, and that's what we decided, was just to do a Randy Rhoads tribute, because it's a lot of guitar and a lot of drums and a lot of bass. And as a result, in 2 weeks, Jagdpanzer's playing the 2 weeks. It's July 17th, I think. We're playing Bang Your Head Festival in front of 25,000 people.
Oh, great.
Yeah, it's just coming up in a few weeks with Accept, Queensryche, Loudness, Dream Theater, Y&T, just a huge bill. And they're letting us do our Randy Rhoads tribute there as well.
Oh, fun.
Yeah, because it's the bass player and drummer from Jagdpanzer and me. So Harry the Tyrant will sing a couple songs, and we'll use festival singers from who's ever playing at the festival to sing one or two songs, and that's going to be fun. And the band is actually going out in September again to play a festival, Harder Than Steel Festival in Germany in September 26th, 27th, and also in playing Greece, and they're going to let us do the Randy Rhoads tribute in Greece too. And I asked him just last night, I said, hey, see if you can get Gus G to sit in with us, because he's living in Athens, I think. And so we'll see you, Gus, if you're listening. We want you. We want you there. And after that, I'll continue to go to Romania to do some stuff over there. Maybe do something in Poland with Atma and Ur, and come back, and just looks like I might be doing something with a band called OLR, One Less Reason. They've had, I think, a gold and a platinum record under their belt. Recording with them coming up really shortly too, and I get a lot of offers to do a lot of things now, and it's a lot of fun. I'm having fun with it.
And do you have any plans, either with Jagdpanzer or solo, to do any more recording for yourself?
Yes. Mark, when I say we, I mean Mark, is writing material for the new record now. I've heard some stuff. It's the plan still is to try and get it recorded in October, November, right in there, so that we can have a January release, so we have something new for the festivals next summer. I know we have a couple of other shows coming up too, the Defenders of the Faith Festival in New York, a small one, and then another festival in, I think, Milwaukee or Chicago coming up shortly too. And then, of course, I definitely am talking about, I'm writing and thinking of ideas for what I want to say on a new solo record as well. So I'll probably, if everything works out right, both of those things will hit together right when, your chops are at an all-time high. Might as well do two instead of one, knock them down.
Two's always better than one.
Yep. Except for when the speeding tickets.
Yeah, there you go. It seems like you're in a real good place here, and you got a really good balance now between music for the sake of music and the fun of music, and then you've got your side, your main business, so you don't really need to rely on it so much either.
The other thing that we've discussed with musicians in my genre and age group, and who've all experienced the 80s, and believe me, I could tell you stories about the 80s, but we all agree that back then there was a lot of pressure, and that what's beautiful now is we don't have that thing where you're sitting around a rehearsal studio saying, gosh, guys, if this next record doesn't go well, we are screwed, right? Now we just get out and play. Most people, like all the major guys, they have something that sustains them. And for guys, that most of a lot of the guys who had some success in the 80s, they have something else that sustains them, some kind of business opportunity, venture that they started, and music can be a little bit more fun. It is a good balance. I feel like it. That I own a business that manufactures musical instrument accessories, so I'm always in tune with musicians and instruments. They're around me all day, and now I get to play whenever I'm the owner, so I can pick up a guitar any day I want and play.
You're allowed to call in sick to go do a gig.
Yeah, or just sit in my office and play a guitar.
That was Joey Tafolla. Hope you enjoyed it. That's it for this week. Remember to check out thedoublestop.com for all the past episodes. I'm Brian Sword. Thanks for listening to The Double Stop.